Hey, Apple shares a little bit lower in today's trade. This, as one of the world's largest market cap companies, as you know, took the rare step of cutting about 100 jobs. It happened in its digital services group. It's part of a shift in priorities for the critical division. At least that's according to people with knowledge of the matter.
Well, reporting this out, as he does all things Apple, back with us is Bloomberg News Chief Technology Correspondent Mark Gurman. He joins us from Los Angeles. Mark, when we talk about Apple, we talk about a company that, as of its latest filing, has about 100,000 employees around the world. A cut of 100 people, it's not huge, but as you write, it's pretty rare for Apple to do layoffs. What's going on?
Job cut is too much. We're talking about people here, so let's just start with that. But 100, in context of how big Apple is, and in context of the size of the layoffs that some of Apple's peer group have done, is very minimal. But layoffs at Apple, no matter how many people are involved, have an outsized influence, right? It's an outsized understanding of what's going on here. Apple simply does not do this. They've done it 4 times this year, 4 times, right? They've probably done 4 rounds of layoffs in the 20 years prior to this year.
Wow.
So this is notable. At the beginning of this year, you had 121 people at an AI Siri-related operations group in San Diego, California. At the end of February, you had several hundred people across 2 projects that were shut down. One, the self-driving car initiative, the other, a micro LED project, right? And if you really look at it, both of those have to do with cost cutting. Even the San Diego one has some cost cutting involved there. The cut to the services division, which, by the way, is Apple's fastest growing and one of its most important organizations in the entire company, one that most people would probably believe would never face any layoffs. That is where the cuts happen. So about 100 jobs, mainly across Apple Books and Apple News. We're talking about engineers. We're talking about design. We're talking about software quality assurance and testing. These people worked across many different platforms within Apple services. Some of them probably touched the App Store. Some of them probably touched Apple Music and Apple TV to some extent. So that's 100 resources there. And if it wasn't purely a cost-cutting move, Apple probably could have relocated those people to other teams from the get-go. To be fair, they're getting 60 days notice here. They have 60 days to find another job within Apple. I would venture to guess that far fewer than half of the 100 people will find a new job within Apple in the next 2 months. So most of those people probably will be leaving the company in 60 days from yesterday when this was announced internally. So this is quite a big deal, although it is 100 people comparatively.
Yeah, and if you're one of those 100, it certainly doesn't feel like a small job cut. Having said that, Mark, why is it then happening? As you said, 4 times this year, this does not happen at this company. So why is it? It's a company that's got a very rich balance sheet. It's got lots of cash. What's going on?
So let me start with yesterday's cut. So Apple Books is not a big part of the overall pie of revenue for the Apple Services organization, right? It's probably one of their weaker services. They don't invest a ton in it. It's not a true moneymaker. Apple News doesn't make a ton of money either, even though there's advertising, even though there's that subscription, which I believe is now $13 a month. So it's simply less of a priority. So there's a bit of a priority shift in Apple services towards streaming video, streaming music, gaming, the App Store and such. Remember, there was that App Store reorganization a couple of weeks ago, which meant that they probably had to reallocate some resources related to that as well. Now, in terms of the layoffs in totality, I think it shows that, Apple is bracing for some sort of recession or trying to get ahead of the possibility of a recession. Wow. Obviously, we've seen stats out there, and Apple wants to be a leaner company. Right? They're not able to spend extra few billion a year at this point, or they don't want to spend an extra few billion a year at this point on bets like the self-driving car, like the micro LED project that they believe there's a strong chance will never come to fruition. Right? Apple can continue to spend $1 billion a year on each of those projects, rack up a bill of an extra $10 billion over the next 5 years, and get absolutely nowhere. But they decided to save that $10 billion and probably reinvest it into bigger priorities like generative AI. They're working on the tabletop robotics project that I've reported on. They're working on a new iPad that's going to require a lot of R&D. This is a 19-inch iPad that can fold in half. They need to do some R&D to redesign the iPhone. They need to put money into shrinking down their components and making them more efficient so they can roll out new form factors. There are some health technologies that they want to roll out. But, the big picture here is AI and probably reinvesting that money into artificial intelligence development.
Mark, Apple as a lean company, I didn't think I'd hear you say that. How would you describe Apple? How would you characterize Apple in terms of it being a quote-unquote lean company?
I watched this great interview with Luca Maestri, the outgoing CFO, earlier this week, and he said that he runs the company with about 10% in his finance office of the amount of people he had while he was a CFO at other public companies prior.
Wow.
Even though Apple's market cap is 10 times the size, if not more, than those companies. Right? He worked at Xerox, he worked at General Motors, a few other companies before Apple. And those are big companies internationally, right? They're global titans as well. He gave this example. So he said his investor relations group has 2 people. He says that Apple's hedge fund, that's Brayburn Capital out of Nevada. They manage Apple's cash, right? Several $100 billion. He says that's 7 people, right?
Wow.
And so I think those are some good examples of how lean they run. In terms of their R&D budget, over the past few years, I've seen the overall company-wide R&D budget either stay stagnant or grow less than 5% on an annual basis. And if you compare that to the R&D budget growth of companies like Meta and Google and Microsoft, it's slim, right? Apple knows that the iPhone and some of their other products and services are going to continue to print a lot of cash and a lot of money, right? They don't want to upset the status quo and risk doing something that is going to put the company in a bad position. Now, what I will tell you is Apple has an issue here where they're not really reinventing themselves. They're not really moving the needle. They are very far behind in artificial intelligence, robotics, and some other areas. And there is a lot of catch up to do. They have become too reliant on this annual September formula of new iPhones, Apple Watches, and AirPods. It does great for the stock. It makes shareholders happy. There's not a lot of needle moving there. And so I believe the company needs to take more risk. And so I guess the hope as a consumer and someone who watches the company, and maybe the hope for employee morale of the people who are still there, is that this amount of money could be reinvested in other areas that will allow Apple to pursue new growth opportunities and create some really cool products. When was the last time you waited in line for an Apple product, and when you got your hands on that device for the first time, you were amazed? I have never seen anything like this before. I can give you a few examples. There was the iPad Air in 2013. There was the first Retina iPad the year before that. The iPhone 4 with that first Retina display and that glass back and front design with the aluminum band around the edges. That was pretty incredible. But it's been a while, maybe the 2018 iPad Pro, maybe the original Apple Watch, maybe the AirPods, but it has been a serious number of years since the last time I feel like they came out with something that was really earth-shattering. And I think COVID played a part in it, right? Across the pandemic, or the height of the pandemic, Apple was able to churn out products still at an amazing pace. They were able to get out the iPhone 12 with 5G only with about a month and a half delay, right in the height of COVID. That is crazy that they were able to do that. And that was a major accomplishment. But what people don't realize is how many years of R&D, how many years of Apple working on these new types of form factors and products and software and services that they normally be doing during COVID, how much of that was just pushed to the wayside in order to prioritize the products they had to get out, right? And everything else going on with the pandemic, people working from home versus the office. So there's a bit of a delay there, and I think it's going to take a few more years for them to catch up.